Welcome everyone, we are in a rush, no time to wash our face or even wash our hair for that matter, because we have something pressing to talk about. Yesterday we talked about the changes in 10.1.5, but those are, 3 weeks away. Instead, what we also have for today is something much closer, is something happening much more close to us, because we have some balance tuning coming live in the next reset. So in a couple of days we're gonna be hit with this tuning. Now, the difference from the tuning of 10.1.5 we talked about yesterday is that those were mostly nerfs. Meanwhile, what we have in here are going to be mostly buffs. Going to be interesting to see now that we have the announcement from yesterday's patch tuning that the Ring of the Urnas chosen is going to be nerfed by 25% in damage, together with the nerf to the Onyx Amulet by 40% in damage. Now we can kind of see whether or not Blizzard is intending to give out some compensation buffs to the specs that were using those rings the most. For now, we start with Blood Death Knight. Blood Death Knight is getting 6.5% damage increase to all of their abilities. Now, these are all of the planned changes for 10.1.5 right now, and you can see that Blood DK also has already 8% damage increase planned in 10.1.5. So this is even further damage given to Blood Death Knight. They are still going to be, no matter these two buffs, doing less damage than Brewmaster, doing less damage than Vengeance, possibly doing less damage than Protection Paladin, but eventually, if Blizzard keeps buffing them more and more, they will reach a point where they will have significant AoE damage, competitive damage, especially in Mythic Plus, which is where this type of damage matters. You have then perhaps the more important of the changes when it comes to DPS. This one is to Havoc Demon Hunter, because Havoc at the moment, for example, live results of Aberrus in Mythic Havoc is not having too good of a time right now. Yeah, even in Mythic Plus, it is still doing, competitive representation in Mythic Plus, but when it comes to the higher level of keys, most of the groups that have to go for a melee DPS, they go for Subtlety, they go for Enhancement, even Fury Warrior over Havoc. They're not doing terrible, they're not something like Assassination Rogue tier, for example, they're not Feral Druid tier, but they are kind of weak right now, or weaker than expected. So Blizzard of course comes in rescue of one of their favorite specs and give them 15% more damage to Chaos Strike and Annihilation. They give them 15% more damage to the melee auto attacks, Demon Blades, Demon Bite, and Fell Blade. Now, this is mostly targeted at single target, not really in terms of AoE. Because, when you take a random Mythic Plus key of a Havoc Demon Hunter, you can see that most of their AoE damage is going to come from I-Beam, from Death Sweep, Glaive Tempest, Inner Demon, Fell Rush, a bunch of trinket effects, Trail of Ruin, Talent. So the actual damage that you get from Demon Blades, Demon Bite, Fell Blade, and your melee auto attack damage, this is melee auto attack damage, it's 3% of your damage, Annihilation is 9% of your damage, Chaos Strike is 2.4%, Demon Blade is 1.6%, Fell Blade is 0.8%, so even if you pool them all together in AoE, it's not even above 2% damage increase, right? So the damage gain in AoE is much weaker. It's going to be somewhat slightly better in single target, which is also where Havoc Demon Hunter is still quite weak. As you can see here, the damage to bosses, so the single target damage done by specs, Havoc is even lower than before. It's second to last, only beating Enhancement Shaman. So it's a necessary buff right now, considering the weakness that Havoc Demon Hunter has, particularly to single target damage. Then you have something else, something also needed, although it's much more simple this time. Feral Druid, all damaging abilities increase by 3%. This seems somewhat of a slap on the wrist, doesn't really seem like it's that good of an increase for Feral considering the problems it has. To be fair, Druid in general in 10.1.5 not only is receiving a decent amount of changes to the general talent tree and your general abilities, but also you do have a decent amount of changes for Feral Druid. So it's not that this is the only thing you will get in the near future. You still have a substantial amount of changes planned for 10.1.5. Talking about planned changes for 10.1.5, past Druid, you're supposed to be having Hunter. there is Evoker right here, and after Evoker there is supposed to be Hunter changes. However, we go from Evoker to Mage. That's because there are no planned changes for Hunters in 10.1.5. So these changes do gain a bit more value, since these are the only things at the moment planned in the next few weeks for Hunters. 10% more killshot damage for Beast Mastery Hunters, and 10% more damage to aim shot, kill shot, and rapid fire for marksmanship. Obviously, there is a disparity here. Beast Mastery Hunter is being buffed at a much lower rate than marksmanship. And that has to do because, generally speaking, in both activities, whether we are talking about raids or whether we're talking about Mythic Plus, we do have a bigger prevalence of Beast Mastery Hunters compared to Marksmanship Hunters in the raid. Same can be said for Mythic Plus, where Beast Mastery, while still not being great, while still not being meta, it is still significantly better than Marksmanship. So these buffs are favoring more Marksmanship, given that they are in a worse situation than Beast Mastery. Of course, it would have been much better if we did actually have some planned changes in the PTR to improve their situations in a more mechanical matter, with some maybe talent changes and whatnot, but that's not what's happening in 10.1.5 for now. What we mentioned yesterday about being kind of sad was the lack of changes to Windwalker Monk after having their best in slot ring, the seal of the Earnest Chosen, being nerfed. Windwalker Monks planned to lose 40% of damage with the Onyx Amulet, which is something that Windwalker Monks still use. One of the few specs that still continuously use this ring that's getting nerfed by 40%. Also, Windwalker Monks were amongst the few that still used the seal of the Earnest Chosen as a powerful ring for them. So now you are waiting about the compensation buffs for Windwalker. If we scroll past Mage and we look at Monk for the 10.1.5 changes, here is Monk, here's Brewmaster, here's Mistweaver, and here's Windwalker. So that's it. That's all you have in 10.1.5. It's a 2% damage increase, which was the compensation for the Onyx Amulet being nerfed. And then you have an extra 3% damage increase right now coming live in the next reset. Still very little, still won't help Windwalker in any way, not getting outscaled by lack of good scaling with their secondary stats on their abilities and passives. So not too much to be happy with when it comes to Monk changes, to Windwalker Monk changes. I mentioned Havoc Demon Hunter being buffed being the largest one of the changes that was in the positive. Because we have a change also to Shadow Priest. The devs are telling us Shadow has been overperforming in AoE environments. We are bringing down some of its sources of AoE and increasing the damage done of some of the direct, single target damage spells for Shadow Priest. So the TLDR is that a whole bunch of abilities, Mind Blast, Shadow Word Death, Mind Spike, Mind Flay, Void Bolt, all have their damage increased. But then you also have Void Spike damage from Idol of Yogg-Saron reduced by 35%, and then Psychic Link splashing less AoE damage compared to live. This is quite significant because the Void Spike from the Idol of Yogg-Saron and Psychic Link, when put together, do end up being a significant portion of your AoE damage. Here's Psychic Link, and here is your Thing of Beyond's Void Spike damage. So getting nerfed by 35% on this one, for example, can already be akin to a 4% AoE damage nerf, plus the nerf to Psychic Link to nerf the AoE damage even more. So it's an attempt at curbing the powerful AoE damage of Shadow. Shadow, of course, also kind of needs more single target damage, because when you look at their good situation in the raid for all bosses, once you start looking at pure single target damage, Shadow is, it's okay, it's average, it's middling, it's definitely not super powerful in single target, so getting their single target buffed is actually something that they needed if you discounted how powerful they were in AoE, which is what made them very popular in Mythic Plus at the moment. The last few changes for today planned for the reset are the damage increases to Holy Priest, because Holy Priest apparently, according to Blizzard, once we look at the damage done, but not of DPS specs, of healers, according to them, Holy Priest is still very, very low in damage. Now, surprisingly, so is Preservation Evoker, but apparently the bigger problem is with With Holy Priest, the change is that Holy Fire damage is increased by 10%, Smite by 15%, Holy War Chastise by 35%, and Shadow War Death by 25%. So these are all pretty good increases for Shadow Priest, nothing, too massive, especially nothing like AoE wise in terms of doing more AoE damage in Mythic Plus. This is mostly in terms of passive damage going off in the raid and maybe some single target boss damage in Mythic Plus, for example, which is admittedly it's useful, it's needed. Holy Priest does far too little damage compared to other specs. Then again, same goes for Preservation Evoker, so I was expecting somewhat similar for them, even if Preservation Evoker just got their disintegrate damage buffed by 15%, it's still a little bit too low at the moment. After Holy Priest we have a couple of changes. One is for Restoration Shaman. Aberrus, the 2-piece set bonus, the Tide Waters healing has been increased by a whopping 40%, and the 4-piece set bonus, the buff increase after using the 2-piece, is increased to 8 seconds duration from 6. This is pretty funny when you look at the healing at the moment in the raid, for example, of Restoration Shaman being very low and very outscaled compared to the beginning of the tier. That's because the tier of Shaman is very poor. That's because they don't gain nearly as many benefits from their tier like Preservation Evoker does, or Resto Druid does, or even Holy Priest does. Their tier was super weak. So it's quite interesting to see that well over a month, actually a month and a half into the season, Blizzard goes like, oh, by the way, we kind of want to buff their set by 40%. That is a pretty big number to realize you have to change 1.5 months into the tier, right? That was known though. Big brain players such as myself knew that this tier for Resto Shaman was garbage and that Resto Shaman would have lost a lot of value deeper into the tier. Lastly, we have a change which might as well not exist. This one is for Protection Warrior. Defensive stance increased to 20% damage reduction from 15%. Now, if a tree falls in the forest and there is nobody to hear it, does it actually make a sound? If defensive stance gets buffed in defensiveness but no warrior clicks on defensive stance, did it actually get buffed? That's the question I will leave you for today. This is a weird way of trying to give Protection Warrior more power, considering that Protection Warriors are not very likely to be playing with defensive stance very often, so you might have wanted to go for different ways of buffing their defensiveness rather than going for defensive stance, but hey, maybe it's just Blizzard trying to encourage you to play your kit to the fullest, clicking all of the buttons you have available for Warrior with defensive stance. This, however, is the last of our changes planned for the hot fixes coming live in a couple of days. Now, once more, there will be similar complaints as the ones we have gotten yesterday for the changes in 10.1.5. Like, for example, once more, I'm looking at Monk and then Priest and then Shaman. The alphabet is P, Q, R, S. R. Where's Rogue? Why is there no Rogue in here? Once more, that's because there are no planned changes for Rogue even after Blizzard announced there were going to be. This is all that's going to be available from now to 10.1.5. A couple of compensation buffs. Literally a couple. 2. And none, by the way, none for Assassination, which is also the worst of the 3 specs and still not getting changes. So yeah, there are going to be some things you will find confusing in here, right? But at least for some of the specs missing from changes like these, you do know they do have bigger changes in 10.1.5. For example, you do have a bunch of changes for Enhancement Shaman coming in 10.1.5, even if it's not listed down here. You also have, of course, the whole changes to mages coming. You also have more changes to Balance Druid, as well as Guardian Druid missing right now in this set of hot fixes. So we do have some more things coming in 10.1.5 besides these changes to these specs. It is sad though, it is sad that some of these specs will be left out to dry. As I mentioned, rogues and hunters at the moment, if I had to pinpoint 2 classes right now not having a good time and about to not have a good time from now to 10.1.5, those would be the 2 classes I would be focused my complaints at the moment. However, with this I'm gonna leave you to your own complaints about these set of changes, or rather the lack of changes for some of the other specs. And for now, I'm going to leave you to the rest of your Sunday. Yes, today is Sunday. Thanks, of course, as usual, to all of the Patreon supporters for the contribution to the growth of the channel. You can still do, of course, completely for free. You can like and comment down below, as well as, Jesus Christ, subscribing to the channel itself, together with following me over on Twitter, as well as following me over on my stream on Twitch, etc, etc, etc. So, with these things out of the way, as I try to regain my aptitude to this light, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, yeah, I mean, yeah, fuck. Yeah, that's better.